What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1, and it's time for our ACC predictions. Conference that could be very interesting. It's interesting, and I'm kind of batting myself into a corner with my predictions here because of some of the videos I've already done on these teams. And you'll find out when we get into this, but it's going to be a pretty interesting scenario here at the end. Let's just jump right in. And we're going to start at the bottom of the ACC. I think you've got four teams that are clearly, like, these are just the worst teams in this conference. I think, a lot of them play each other. I think they'll all find a way to get a win somewhere in there. But, yeah, I don't see a lot coming from these four teams. Wake Forest with a new coach. Stanford, they're probably going to be the worst team. Cal's not going to be very good. And even Boston College, I don't really see a whole lot to like about Boston College. So, yeah, I am not high on this team or these four teams. I don't think they're going to be very good. But I'm going to give each one of them a conference win. Now, I'll tell you what, Wake Forest has a really easy schedule, especially in the non-conference. So if they can find their way to 2 conference wins, they could actually get to a bowl game. The other 3 teams, I just don't see that happening. Let's move on now to Virginia Tech. So Virginia Tech, a team that I think will be not great either. There's a lot, like, the roster is more talented than Wake Forest, Boston College, Cal, and Stanford. So they do have, like, there is a little bit of a gap. And I think they get a few wins in the conference, 3-5 in the ACC. 5-7 overall, though. They do have a couple of tough non-conference games with South Carolina and Vanderbilt. So I think getting to a bowl game is going to be tough for Virginia Tech. I got them at 5-7. And then I've got Syracuse getting to a bowl game, 6-6, but 4-4 in the conference here. It's a pretty tough schedule, honestly, for Syracuse when you look at it. I think this team does drop off a good bit from where they were last year. I know they had a really strong season last year, but they lost a lot. And so I think there are some question marks there for Syracuse. So I don't think they're going to be great, but it's also really the schedule. When you look at their schedule, I mean, you got Tennessee right out of the gate in the non-conference. I think that's going to be a tough one to win. And then Notre Dame on the road, that's going to be a tough game. And then in the ACC, they have to play Clemson on the road, SMU on the road, Georgia Tech on the road, and Miami on the road. Do you really see them winning any of those games on the road? I mean, that's going to be tough. They've also got Duke, Pitt, and North Carolina. When you start looking at the schedule, you start thinking, I don't know if they can even get to 6-6 because this is a very, very tough schedule. I would say I don't have my schedule rankings in front of me, but I would say this is probably the toughest schedule in the ACC overall. So yeah, it's brutal, and I think 6-6 is probably about as good as they're going to do. In fact, I'd say Syracuse more likely to go 5-7 than 7-5. I know with Fran Brown and everything, the recruiting, there's a lot of momentum in this program for the future. I just don't think this year is that year. Next year, maybe they make a big leap and maybe they compete for an ACC championship, but this year, I just don't see it happening. So let's move on now to another 6-6 team. That's going to be Florida State, 4-4 in the ACC. I think they'll be better this year. I think Castellanos is going to do really well in this Gus Malzahn offense. So that's the positive here with FSU. But there's still a lot of holes with this roster. I mean, they're not going to go from as bad as they were to being a really good team overnight. They've got some experience on the offensive line. I know they've struggled there. And the skill position is an area where, are they good enough? The defense, I mean, there are just a lot of question marks, but I think they're good enough. And again, with Castellanos running this offense, I think that they will find a way to get some wins in the ACC. I really do. Now, they do have to play Alabama and Florida in the non-conference, so that's going to be very tough. But 4-4 in the ACC, I think that's a pretty solid season for them. A good bounce back, get to a bowl game. And that's where I've got the Seminoles. Next, we've got North Carolina, 7-5 overall, 4-4 in the conference. Of course, with Bill Belichick, a lot of hype around this team. I don't think they're going to be great, honestly. I think their schedule, though, sets up really, really well. I think they can get to 7-5. You look at the non-conference, they got Charlotte, they've got Richmond. Those are going to be 2 easier wins. They do have to play TCU in the non-conference. They also have UCF. That's another game they'll have. They do play 2 Power 4 teams. I don't think UCF's going to be very good. TCU, I think, is going to be a tough one for them to beat. But then you look at, they get to play Cal, they get Virginia, they get Stanford, they get Duke, they get Wake Forest, they get Syracuse. So, yeah, they have a really favorable conference schedule. And I think because of that, they can actually have a pretty good year, 7-5. 4-4 in the conference. Again, my prediction. Now, if they had Syracuse schedule, I don't think they'd make a bowl game. So again, the schedules matter so much when you're trying to make predictions for these teams. Syracuse with a really tough one, North Carolina with a really easy one. You also got teams like Wake Forest and Virginia with easier schedules. And speaking of Virginia, they're next. So I've got them 8-4, 4-4 in the conference. I think this team actually could be decent this year. I like the offensive line. Could be one of the better offensive lines in the conference. You bring in Chandler Morris, a guy who's been all around a talented quarterback. If they can get a lot out of him, I think this Virginia team overall could be pretty good. Not competing for a conference championship, but pretty good. And again, their schedule sets up really well. They get home games against Coastal Carolina, William and Mary, Stanford, Florida State, Washington State, Wake Forest, Virginia Tech. I mean, those are all definitely winnable games. And then road games, you've got Cal, you've got Duke, you've got North Carolina. So perhaps they can pull off one or two of those wins. So I really like the schedule for Virginia. I think this team could be a bit of a surprise team this year. And again, we go back to Mark Rogers plus or minus 3, where over 20 teams pretty much every year in the Power 4, or the Power 5, how it used to be, they win or lose 3 more games than the year before. So I think Virginia is a candidate for that. 5-7 last year. They make a jump to 8-4. And, you got to try to find those teams if you're making predictions. You can't just pick every team to do similar to what they did last year. If you're going to try to really be accurate here, you've got to take some chances. And you've seen me do that in the other conferences. I know some of you maybe don't agree with some of those picks, but I do think Virginia, really, I do think they can get to 8-4 with the schedule. Next, we've got Georgia Tech, 7-5 overall, 5-3 in the conference. I actually got them losing to Colorado. That game's on the road, and I talked about this in the Big 12 video. I think Colorado's actually be pretty good. And then, of course, they've got Georgia, but I think they get some wins in the ACC. I think they do finish in the top half of this conference. I like what they've got coming back. Going to be a good team overall. I think the defense will be solid. I think you got one of the best running backs in the country returning. You've got Haynes King back at quarterback, who can, maybe lacking a little bit in the pass game, but he can make plays with his legs. So I just think this is going to be a tough team to beat, and I've got them getting to 7-5. Then we've got NC State, a team that I think could be a team on the rise this year. 8-4 overall, 5-3 in the conference. I like what they've got coming back. I think this team could be pretty solid, especially on the defensive side in the front seven. This could be one of the better front sevens in the ACC. So I really like NC State. I like their schedule. I think it sets up well for them to have a pretty strong year, 8-4, which is really typical of what we usually get from NC State. I know it's been, maybe not quite that in the last couple of years, but I think they can get to 8-4 and have, a pretty strong season this year. And then we go to Duke. I think Duke could be pretty good this year. Really on defense, that's where they're going to shine. This could be potentially the best defense in the ACC. I'm not going to say that they will be, but I think they have that potential. You bring in a transfer quarterback who can really elevate that position. I think Duke could be a tough team to beat this year. I believe they were 9-3 last year, so this is actually the same record. But I think this team will be better. I think it'll be a better team, even if the record turns out the same. Just the schedule was really easy last year. But I've got them beating Illinois in the non-conference, winning 5 games in the ACC. I think Duke could be a pretty tough out this year. I really do. All right, I'm just going to mention Notre Dame. I know they're not technically in the ACC, but since we're kind of doing all the Power 4 teams, just thought I'd mention them. I did do a video for Notre Dame, but I had them in 11-1, and of course probably in the college football playoff. So just wanted to hit that real quick now, because I didn't want to do that last, because we want to, of course, build the suspense on the teams at the top of the conference in the standings. So next we go to Louisville, 9-3, 5-3. I like the way their schedule sets up. Louisville has a pretty favorable schedule when you look at it. They got Clemson at home. They do have, they have Pitt, Miami, Virginia Tech, SMU. So they do have some pretty tough games there on the road in the ACC. Their non-conference schedule is easy with Eastern Kentucky, James Madison, Bowling Green, and Kentucky. Kentucky, I don't expect to be very good this year. So I think the schedule sets up well for them. I think this is going to be a pretty solid team. To me, they're like a borderline top 25 team. I don't see any real big weaknesses with them. So I think Louisville could be maybe even a contender in the ACC. And all these teams that I've got at 5-3, I think those are teams that could possibly get there. If we want to go back a couple of screens, yeah, I think from Georgia Tech up, all of these teams, these are your contenders. So I think Virginia, not quite there. North Carolina, Florida State, I would be very, very surprised if they got there. But these other teams, wouldn't be surprised if one of them was able to get in there. So let's move on now. After Louisville, we've got SMU. I've got SMU 8-4, 6-2 in the conference. A couple of tough losses in the non-conference for me with, I believe it was Baylor and TCU on the schedule. And then I think they lose a couple of games in the ACC. This could be a good team, though. I mean, I think people are really overlooking them. I think the schedule is tougher this year, and that's ultimately why they're going to lose a few games. But I think it wouldn't surprise me if this team was back in the ACC Championship, or even winning the ACC, maybe back in the college football playoff. They got a really good offensive line. So yeah, SMU is definitely a team to watch, but a tough schedule. That's why I've got them dropping to 8-4. And again, you've got that plus or minus rule. This is a team that was 11-1, so a good candidate for one of those teams that could possibly win or lose 3 games more from last year. All right, next we got Miami 8-4 overall, but 6-2 in the ACC. I've got them losing to Notre Dame and Florida in the non-conference, but I think they do pretty well in the ACC, and so 6-2 there. That's going to put them right at the top of the conference. We know the roster is talented. This seems, probably maybe the most talented overall roster in the conference. I don't think that's a stretch if you want to say that. Do we trust Mario Cristobal? Not a whole lot. Carson Beck, can he get back to what he was 2 years ago? That's going to be something to watch. So I think Miami is definitely a boom or bust team. They are a team that could make a real run this year, or possibly be closer to like 7-5. So yeah, 8-4 I think is a pretty fair prediction for them. 8-4, 9-3, I think that's where they wind up. Then we've got Pitt at 9-3, 6-2, another team that I think could surprise this year. They got a really good defense. Talked about Duke possibly having the best defense in this conference. Maybe it's Pitt. I think they're really good there. I know with the injury to Eli Holstein last year, the offense kind of fell apart. If he can stay healthy, I think they'll be much better there. And I think we'll see that Pitt team that we saw early in the year last season before, again, he got injured and things kind of fell apart. And then finally, I've got Clemson, also 6-2, 10-2 overall. And again, this is where I'm regretting some of my previous predictions, because I kind of wish if I was going to go 10-2 with Clemson, I wish I had gone 7-1 in the ACC. Because I'll explain in just a second. But we got Clemson, Pitt, Miami, and SMU all tied. So who goes to the ACC Championship? Well, first, let's look at my predictions from the last 3 years. This is how I predicted the ACC Championship. I haven't done a great job in this conference. Just being honest here. Last year I had Miami over Clemson. Of course, that was Clemson over SMU. The year before, I did get Florida State right. I had them beating Clemson. They wound up beating Louisville in the ACC Championship. And then Miami over Clemson is what I had in 2022 as well. That turned out to be Clemson over, I believe, North Carolina. So, I haven't been horrible, but would like to have done a little bit better in the ACC. So let's now look at this tiebreaker. What it comes down to with Clemson, SMU, Miami, and Pitt, it actually comes down to the common opponents, and it's Louisville. That's the game. So if you look at my predictions, I have SMU and Clemson losing to Louisville. I have Miami and Pitt beating Louisville, and that is why you wind up with Pittsburgh and Miami in the ACC Championship. And again, I kind of boxed myself into a corner here. I really would like to have Clemson in this game. If you just ask me, who's going to go to the ACC Championship, I'd say Clemson and then probably Miami, Pitt, or SMU. But I would definitely have Clemson there, but that's just not the way it worked out. They wound up not getting there because of the tiebreaker. So we wind up with Pitt, Miami in a rematch from the previous week because they play each other to close out the season. I had Pittsburgh winning that game. Can Pittsburgh beat Miami back-to-back weeks? I don't think so. I think there's too much talent on this Miami team. I think Miami gets it done. So in this scenario, we've actually got Miami at 8-4, now 9-4, winning the ACC Championship, which means they're going to go to the college football playoff with 4 losses. And I think there will be people not liking that. And, we haven't revealed the full predictions yet, but let's say Florida does not get in at 9-3. A 9-3 Florida team that beat an 8-4 Miami team does not get in, and a Miami team does get in. If this happens, then you're going to start seeing some, some outrage and people saying, well, it should just be the best team. It shouldn't matter if you win your conference and all that. So that's definitely an interesting discussion. It has nothing to do with this video. But anyways, Miami winds up winning the ACC based on these predictions. Again, I think Clemson's the best team. If Clemson can get there, I would definitely pick them to win the ACC championship. But because of my tiebreaker scenario, yeah, I do not have Clemson in there. And so we're going to go Miami. So Miami, which at the end of the day is, I kind of like this prediction because I think Miami has the potential to be really good and be in this spot a lot more than a Pitt or an SMU. So, yeah, we'll live with this prediction. But, yeah, Miami winning the ACC, that is my prediction. I would love to get you guys' thoughts on this. A crazy tiebreaker again, potentially. But who do you have winning the ACC? And what are your predictions? Let me know down in the comments below.